All right. Why don't we get this show on the road? Let's start, and we'll do quick introductions on the Coursedog side first. Annie and Jesse, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Annie?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie de Lezica. I am a project manager here in Coursedog in our customer success division. I joined a little bit over a year ago, and really I credit much of my ramping knowledge and experience to working closely with NAU. They were one of my first clients that I had the pleasure to partner with. They really are some of the brightest folks I've had the pleasure to work with. They know our product in and out. They're super users. They leverage it to enforce best practices. So I'm so excited to be sitting here with them today. Yeah, nice to see everyone.
Great. I'm Jesse Lyman. I am the Director of Data Engineering in Customer Success at Coursedog. I worked closely with NAU from start to finish through the implementation and deployment of Coursedog in their platform, and we worked very closely and still do.
Hey everyone, I'm Justin Wenig. I'm co-founder and CEO of Coursedog. NAU, my backstory with NAU was I had the chance back when Coursedog was a much younger company, about a year and a half ago. Feels like maybe it's 2 years ago. It feels like a lifetime away, but I had the opportunity to meet with the folks at NAU and in Flagstaff, and really excited to sort of share our story together today. Bonita?
Hi, I'm Bonita Switala, Associate Registrar with Academic Scheduling at NAU, and I'm excited about this webinar. Yeah.
Grant.
My name is Grant Burden. I work under Bonita Switala as a class scheduler and resource facilitator, and I've been happy to be a part of the Coursedog implementation project for about the last year or so.
Awesome. Cool. So I'd love to start. I'll give a little bit of background on NAU and how our partnership came to be, but a little bit about NAU. NAU is a large public research university in Flagstaff, Arizona. I will say in higher education, I think they're known as one of the more innovative schools that is out there. NAU is about 30,000 plus, FTE. They're a PeopleSoft institution. And NAU was an early Coursedog adopter and innovator. They were thinking about scheduling rules back when I was probably in high school or something. That may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too much of one. But I've learned a lot from NAU about scheduling best practices, and I think and I was really grateful that they decided to work with us early on. We'll talk more about that in a bit. A little bit about where NAU was, and feel free to chime in at any point here, Bonita or Grant, but what did NAU look like before Coursedog exists? So, prior to Coursedog, NAU dealt with a number of common scheduling pain points that I think a lot of the folks who are in the audience today will probably could say that resonate with them. First and foremost, there was the actual process of getting the schedule into the SIS, right? Manual data entry happening into PeopleSoft for the sections, for the times, for the different fields that are associated with the section in PeopleSoft. And that resulted in a lot of manual work, a lot of data inconsistencies, and a lot of duplicate work, right? They had disparate communication channels and workflows. A lot of that sort of section schedule planning was done on email chains and spreadsheet planning. And this, while I think NAU was quite forward-looking in terms of wanting to create a schedule that truly was student-driven, this created a lot of sort of frustration for, folks like, Bonita and Grant, and also, on the student side of, for, in cases, not having the schedule work the way that they wanted it. The process of auditing any policies, whether it was, distributing the schedule or balancing sections or making sure that we're, not only distributing the times effectively, but being effective stewards of our space, it was very tedious to audit that. And there were space constraints during these peak schedule times. I'm sure everyone knows all faculty ask for a 2 p.m. time slot. How do I give them the 2 p.m. class, that 2 p.m. classroom? How am I going to give it to them? And then, last but not least, just time consuming after the fact change requests. I feel free, anyone who's here, you can chime in the chat. Does anyone here get after the fact change requests? I've never heard a school say no to that one, and that can be a really challenging process. Bonita or Grant, is there anything that you folks wanted to add here about just some of your pain points before Coursedog existed?
No, I think you've hit on really what our pain points were, and they are consistent across most universities that I've spoken to in the past.
Awesome. Cool. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the story of Coursedog with NAU. And I want to start, first and foremost, just to share with the folks who are here, who is Coursedog? Coursedog is really, our vision is really to break down barriers in the curriculum management process. We offer a suite of tools that help with the process of proposing new courses, publishing them to the catalog, and scheduling both the sections and rooms in an optimal way. What we're going to be focusing on primarily today is the class scheduling process, and in particular, the section scheduling process of actually creating a well-distributed schedule without a lot of tedious work. And we're going to learn some of the best practices that NAU has sort of picked up along the way. Do you, Annie, want to take, or do you want to talk a little bit about our general implementation approach before we sort of dive into this?
Yeah, of course. I think with partners like NAU, one of the main drivers and what we've been able to accomplish is to truly be design partners. I think that's one of the biggest things for us. So we've really collaborated on feature development in order to meet a lot of their evolving needs. That's a very collaborative process. So I think we broke down a lot of communication barriers and really just heard what mattered the most to NAU and what they thought would be most impactful. We were able to take that back to our product teams, our engineers, get a sense of technical lift involved there, and really align on what made the most sense, delivering time to value and just a really good product that could have great impact immediately after go live, but then we kept iterating on it and making it a more robust solution as the months went by as well. From an implementations perspective, at Coursedog, what we typically do is we have the project manager like myself that's really overlooking the entire relationship during the implementation process, making sure that timeline is respected, that needs are being addressed, coordinating resources internally and externally. Jesse was tremendously involved in the NAU implementation. I'll let him speak to the data engineering side of it and how that was its own partnership as well. But I really have to credit a lot the NAU team as well, because they weren't kind of like a passive agent in this implementation process. They really were sponges and absorbed our product and just ran with it. A lot of the times, we have a very flexible product, which means we can implement or solve a problem in various different ways. And we can share those and outline those and say, these are the pros and cons of each and every one of those. But NAU really took it a step further and really was creative with our various functionality, really understood all of the downstream impact of it, and was very thoughtful around how they implemented this for go live. But yeah, Jesse, is there anything that you'd like to highlight specifically from the data engineering side?
Yeah, definitely. NAU came to the table with a mindset of doing a deep dive into their system and saying, this is how our scheduling works. And comparing that in our data workbooking process, which we do with our clients to onboard, they participated extremely in a detailed way and said, look, this field doesn't line up. This doesn't line up. How are we going to match it up? And that drove not only new features in our product, but also ensured that how NAU's business processes worked was respected in our system. And I think that was a really important part of the engagement. And it was iterative, like you said, but NAU's team was very engaged and very detailed in that process. Our data workbooking piece was very important to the success of the project.
And I'd like to piggyback on that and just say that Coursedog did a fabulous job providing us with a spreadsheet, a starting place for data mapping. Have not had any other vendor provide that kind of support in the past. And it was built out into an enormous document. But for us to have that to start with and to have that support was incredible.
Awesome. So I'd love to talk a little bit about just some of the high level implementation goals of what we were hoping to accomplish with NAU. Bonita, do you want to talk a little bit about this, or do you want me to grab this? Either one totally works.
On the implementation goals, yeah, we really wanted to give back to academic units their ability to input their changes and to build their classes in the system. That was really important to academic units. But what the challenge was ensuring that what they built followed our best practices, our policies, institutional policies. And that's where Coursedog has proven to be vital for us, is that we were able to customize the system with our rules, our particular rules. They provided us with additional filters to allow us to do that. To build, I don't know how many rules we have. I would think probably somewhere around 100. I don't know. And filters, that's probably astronomical. But for us to be able to do that was huge, because it allowed us to give that back to the academic units, while also ensuring that builds are accurate, they're complete, reducing the number of queries, data integrity reviews that we have to run. And so, yeah, those were our goals, and we feel we accomplished those. And then I'll let you speak about the rest. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great overview, Bonita. And I think when we can enforce, at a high level, I think about when we can enforce these scheduling rules, not only does it take a lot of the burden off of the registrars or the scheduling coordinators in the process, because a system is automatically making sure that we're not making errors, but it also gives us the space and the agility to be able to enforce these best practices and have it in an intuitive way shown to our end users, so that we can get to a more student-friendly and student success-driven schedule. Cool. Awesome. I think we talked a little bit about this, lots of, the idea that NAU uses so many schedule rules to create this unbelievably student-centric schedule throughout the process. Monitoring and voting on rule exception requests within the request dashboard. Bonita, would you want to talk a little bit about how you folks came up with some of these scheduling rules and what that process looked like at a high level?
Yeah, we started with a spreadsheet, and we just started listing all the rules that we needed. But our hero here is Grant Burden, because he built those rules for us and all of the filters. And so I'll let Grant speak about that.
Awesome.
Right. So like Bonita said, this started as kind of a high level discussion of critical scheduling policies and historic pain points for schedule of classes. So we started with the spreadsheet, and then we transitioned this into rules and filters by what was available in the Coursedog interface. And from there, it was mostly just the process of acquiring the data and seeing what was possible within the product. One thing I really want to touch on, though, like Bonita said and Justin mentioned, the rules are critical for enforcing the scheduling policies, and they're really helpful to SOC in terms of reducing the number of queries and data integrity checks that we need to do. From the business relationship side of things, even with the other NAU departments, they've really given our admin assistants and academic schedulers a great sense of autonomy in working on their builds, feeling like they have more freedom of choice, while simultaneously helping new schedulers learn our business policies and practices and have some kind of safety net in place to know that they're not going to make any sort of egregious mistake. So just on the interpersonal relationship side of things, I feel like the Coursedog product, and especially the rules themselves, have helped smooth over SOC's relationship with our academic schedulers and really helped us grow more tightly together with our own departments.
Sorry, I think I'm on mute. That's super helpful context, Grant. And I think it may be helpful just for the folks that are joining us. I can just, quickly pull up and show how the Coursedog rules interface works. But at a high level, what Coursedog's rules allow you to do are you can create any sort of configurable rule that's baked into the system. So it could be something as simple as a standard meeting pattern, or it could be something as complex, like NAU has, that's built completely custom and from scratch. So what Coursedog has the ability to actually define these filters, where I could say, hey, if the section type contains 1, 2, 3, or if there's, something weird that happens during the departmental process of building out that plan, I can actually say, hey, show a failure to them. Hey, the section contains 1, 2, 3. And I can have that show up to my actual departments during the schedule process. So the awesome thing about this is that rather than after the fact, running into issues that the registrar needs to clean up, or reviewing data on a spreadsheet, or having to build out crazy Excel functions to be able to maintain this stuff, this information can be presented up front to the end user, to the person who's building the section, so that they're able to easily make adjustments prior to submitting that schedule through to someone like Bonita or Grant. So this cuts down on a lot of the back and forth communication. Like I think Grant said, can help with the relationship side of things. And, this also allows for you to do, let's say, for example, I create a rule, but I do want to allow someone to submit a non-standard meeting pattern, but I only want to do it, for example, like if I only, when someone requests a non-standard meeting pattern, want it to go through a workflow. Coursedog has this really simple request dashboard where you can review all of your requests in a single place. I'll just pull this up. So the idea of this is that, if I wanted to submit my schedule and I said, hey, I want to submit this non-standard meeting pattern, this can be routed through a request really seamlessly to whomever you want in that approval process, and they can review that and then ultimately make a decision. Awesome. I'll hop back to this. Cool. Do the folks at NAU want to talk about some of the just drivers of some of the things that have worked well after adopting Coursedog and that have been beneficial to NAU?
Yeah, I think we kind of covered some of it as far as the autonomy and ownership. As I said, that was very important to our academic units, to be able to give that back to them. And it allowed, it gave us some flexibility as well, because our personnel were able to focus on other things aside from, being concerned about all of these various data fields that could create roadblocks for students or even impact tuition and those kinds of things. So, so that's really been beneficial. Let me see what else here. As far as the queries, like I said, we were able to reduce the number of queries that we run, and we ran them for several months just to see. And sure enough, we did not see any of those errors for those fields that, or for those rules that we had built in there. So feel very confident about the fact that they're working as they should be. And as far as builds, it's wonderful that we can separate those out. We can be in a build cycle. We are multi-term enrollment university, so our students enroll in 4 builds or 4 terms at a time. And so we are completing 4 builds consecutively, one after the other, about 2 years in advance. And so this system allows us to work in that complicated, 7 terms at a time situation, and it flows very smoothly, and so we feel like it has benefited us in just about every way that that we had imagined that it would. And Grant, is there anything that you want to add to that?
I think you've pretty much got everything covered there. I would like to add that the request process that Justin mentioned earlier has saved our department in the Registrar schedule of classes at NAU probably a couple hundred hours a semester of manual data entry and review. And the UI is super intuitive, so no longer are we having to waste our own time moving through our SIS when we have the more sleek, more user-friendly Coursedog interface.
And one more thing is that with the use of the rules, our merge reports, our errors are almost nothing. It's almost nothing that we see there. And it's because of the various rules that we have in there.
I think that's such a great point because I think you folks have done such a good job at combining rules for the purposes of the integration sanity and PeopleSoft enforced logic that we can also enforce on the Coursedog side to make sure that those reports are clean, while also incorporating your business practices and stuff that PeopleSoft wouldn't necessarily enforce, but that is a hard constraint for you folks, and you want that guidance to be embedded for the user experience. So that's been great to see you strike that balance so well. And on the Coursedog end, something that we've been able to do is really kind of have a very solid understanding of what's required on the PeopleSoft side. Jesse is a PeopleSoft expert, and he has such a great grasp of all of that. And we're able now to have a baseline for that. So in implementations as we go on with our PeopleSoft partners, we're not starting from scratch. We already have a robust understanding of best practices.
Awesome. Cool. And I'd love to, I think I want to use the majority of the time really just to do a little bit of Q&A, as sort of questions come in, and then I'm happy to sort of show folks some of the things that we're talking about in addition to the rules that I went over a little bit. But one question that I have that pops to the top of my mind, implementing a software like Coursedog, can be a large endeavor. It requires someone like Jesse, it requires someone like Annie. And I'm just curious from your perspective, Bonita and Grant, what advice would you have for other campuses that are thinking about starting to create scheduling rules or adopting a platform like Coursedog? And, how have you been able to sort of get campus buy-in into going in this direction?
For us, like I said, the campus buy-in was the desire for them to have that ability to go into a system themselves versus sending us the spreadsheets and we input it. And so the buy-in started there. It was kind of a request, but it was also on our side, like, gosh, how do we save ourselves all this time? How do we save ourselves all the frustration of the various issues that an error or inputting something that goes against the policy, all those impacts that it has, how do we avoid all of that from happening? And so those two, it was those two things that really created the desire for us to find a solution, and Coursedog was that solution for us. And Grant, do you have anything else to say about that?
No, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, Bonita. That was great.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to pull up my screen and talk a little bit about the Coursedog application. Second here. Awesome. So I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to talk through some of the basic components of the Coursedog scheduling app for the folks that are joining us. And then Jesse, Annie, Bonita, would love to just hear any insights about how different features are used at NAU, and how you folks have thought about how it's cut down on your either data entry or made things more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. But everything in Coursedog really starts with the SIS integration. Coursedog has a really tight bidirectional integration with pretty much all major SIS systems. In the case of NAU, that is PeopleSoft. And what Coursedog does is we actually get the schedule information out of PeopleSoft, and then we send some of that information back to PeopleSoft as well from the section creation, eliminating the need for manual duplicate data entry throughout the process. I'm just curious, Jesse, Annie, Bonita, what are the reports that you folks think are the most valuable, in your sort of day-to-day workflow? Maybe, I don't know, Bonita or Grant, if I would love to just hear from you folks first.
Sure thing, Justin. I would say right off the bat, the conflicts report is by far a wonderful tool to just get a large picture overview of what needs work at the schedule at a given time, which is really useful for a university the size of NAU when we're scheduling 25,000 class sections a year. It's nice to be able to see in just a moment general areas that need work or that need attention.
That makes perfect sense. Some of the other reports that I think are really helpful to a lot of our clients, things looking at the actual enrollment heat maps, that we can understand where the concentration of the schedule is, what are our prime times, where is enrollment really dense, underutilized sections, where is there potential to cut sections for efficiencies, and where may we have bottlenecks for students where we may want to expand the number of sections. I think the biggest driver for most of our clients, especially on the class scheduling side, comes down to these rules, which we talked about a little bit. But I just want to, show the flexibility of these. A rule can be anything from a standard meeting pattern to a prime time hour rule. Hey, only 20% of sections should be scheduled in prime time. They also can involve a, what we call relationship, which basically is a form of rule that allows us to say, hey, this is scheduled, this section or this class is scheduled at, a different time from this other section. And this really allows for, you to create, let's make sure Bio 101 and Chem 101 are not, taught, maybe they need to be taught at the same time, or maybe they need to be taught at different times. And what you'll see here is that Coursedog in real time surfaces these rules to end users so that they can eliminate making errors after the fact or building schedules that, violate these relationships. For folks that are familiar with, the SIS side of things on this, you may have a concept of cross-enrolled sections or cross-listed sections or anything of that sort. And Coursedog sort of supports that. I don't know if there's anything that the NAU team or the Coursedog team wants to add on this, but that's just relationships in general.
I think one thing that really the NAU team got a lot of value out of is the fact that we can change the label of these relationships. So for example, in Coursedog, at the end of the day, what we're looking at, right, is room, day, time. So what we care about is should it be at on the same day, at the same time, in the same room. But you can actually name that relationship something different than same time, same day, same room. And the NAU team specifically was able to include that guidance in this custom display name field so that it felt familiar to end users and they knew which option to pick and didn't have to be doing the mental math and hurdles in their mind to understand, what the correct option was. So a lot of that guidance becomes seamless without the need for additional help documentation or anything like that. But rather it's very seamless in the UI.
A great question through the chat. Someone asks, can you create a rule that allows classes to be taught in sequence to help students in certain majors create good and non-conflicting schedules? So I'd say the answer, one, it's somewhat dependent on your SIS and the way that you maintain this information in the first place. At a high level, we do have a lot in particular of professional school customers that use this concept of relationships to be able to create more complex forms of what you may call a sequence. So for example, I might say, here's a bunch of classes that need to be taught in a, at different times or in a certain, or at the same time or whatever it may be. I don't know, Annie or Jesse, if you want to share anything more on that, but at a high level, the answer is, you absolutely can create these complex relationships in Coursedog between those sections. Great question. Cool. So when our end user, and I just want to drive this home, the idea is not that folks are building in Excel spreadsheets. The idea is that we're taking the whole section scheduling process and we're putting it into this really user-friendly interface where folks are easily able to sort of configure, hey, here's the fields that I'm going to fill out. The rules will do the automatic checking. And then, there's even a built-in audit log so that, folks, you're able to see all the edits on the sections. I know, Bonita, this was something that was, how often do you use the audit log?
The audit log is great because oftentimes folks would say, well, I never made that change, or, something's wrong with the system. And you could see the date and who made the change. It's just, it's a wonderful tool. It avoided us from having to go back and audit ourselves, audit everything. It's right there for us. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is that it's very intuitive. And we were able to get rid of all of the fields in PeopleSoft that a scheduler or a user would not have to input. And so it makes it much more fluid for them to just go through these cards and know that these are the only fields that they need to enter. And if someone's new, we have a lot of turnaround of schedulers and chairs. So it's difficult for them to really understand PeopleSoft and understand, oh, that's a field I have to enter, that's a field I don't. Here, it's fluid. And as I said, very intuitive.
Awesome.
And that's something that I think we did a good job on through the implementation as well, which was when building out this form, and it's completely flexible, what fields we show, what data is auto-populated into them by default, what the choices are. So if I'm building a class, a section in Coursedog, the fields that I see should be the right ones that are approved for that course. And that was a really important part of building this section editor screen. Again, fully flexible, configurable, but allow us to lock it down in a way that the schedulers couldn't get it wrong. They could only choose from the correct options. I think that was a really important development that came out of our work together here.
Totally. And for the folks who are joining, because I see we've got some folks from some different schools, these forms that Coursedog allows you to configure, where you can have the fields and the rules and the the flexibility. This is across all of our apps. So just as a note, if you're a Coursedog curriculum customer or if you're a Coursedog catalog customer, all of this, it's all using the same underlying data template, which makes it, just one thing to learn, one platform to train users on, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the reasons as well, so just to give folks a sense, the way, let's say that someone was to submit their schedule and they wanted to submit certain exception requests. They want to say, I want to submit a non-standard meeting pattern, or I want to violate a certain rule. Coursedog can track all of that and send it through the workflow system. I know it's fairly simple, I guess, at NAU, but I'd love to just learn a little bit about how you thought about configuring workflows at NAU and just what that process, what it roughly looked like.
Sure thing, Justin. So like you mentioned, the workflow structures for NAU are relatively simplistic. So our main decision process for our primary workflow change was deciding whether a decision or class should go through the review of our registrar's office or the review of our statewide team who manage a number of campuses outside of Flagstaff. So the level of granularity in the workflow structure allows us to designate where a request should go based on the structure or the submitter of the request. So in our eyes, we mostly just needed to split if it was going to us or if it should be going to another reviewer at a different campus.
That's awesome. And, you know, for the folks who are joining, Coursedog's workflow has a lot of built-in flexibility. You know, you can say, hey, I want to route this proposal differently if it's the bio department and change that on the fly. Or, hey, you know, if, you know, there's something that's specific that's filled out as a part of the section template, maybe I want to jump it to the provost. You can also configure it so that when you get a request, right, whether for an after the fact change request or a rule exception request, you can trigger an automatic email to go out to the actual person who is the approver so that they can actually, you know, be able to then click into that request directly from their email. You know, likewise, there's a lot of logic that's built into this. You can say how many votes are required. You can set a deadline so that, you know, if someone leaves campus, maybe I'm going to route it to a backup person, or I'm going to move the request to the next step. And all of this just makes it so that, plain and simple, at the end of the day, you can sit on a single dashboard as an approver and be able to say, hey, what are my outstanding requests? How long have they been waiting in queue? You know, you can filter them, look at it in different ways. I'd love to hear, you know, Bonita and Grant, how do you folks really use the request? I know you folks are the mega experts of the request dashboard, but how is the request dashboard used in your workflow? I know it's a lot, and how has it improved efficiencies for you folks?
Thanks, Justin. So one key piece of the UI on the request dashboard is the status and the customizability of the columns. Like we can see here, you have request, aging, step, and author. So this system has allowed us to stay substantially more organized compared to our prior survey system, which just required manual checking. And the filters here have allowed us to stay on top of outstanding requests such that nothing at this point ever slips through the cracks, which is absolutely key when we're doing 4 terms worth of enrollment and requests at a time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think the great thing about this, and again, you know, just for folks who are joining us, this request dashboard is the same dashboard that folks would use across different applications in Coursedog. So if, for example, you were to use our curriculum app or our new Foreman workflow builder tool, or, you know, for example, you have an edit course request, this all is using the same dashboard. So you're only training users on one interface, one platform that manages your workflow on campus. And so, you know, as a part of this, when you get that request, you know, you can approve it, you can reject it, you can leave some sort of comment on this. You can see what step in the workflow it's at. You know, in curriculum, for example, you may want to route this back to someone, you know, hey, send it back to the author. This proposal doesn't work, or this non-standard meaning pattern does not work because of X, Y, Z. And so, you know, you even can edit this, right? I can go in and I can say, hey, I actually want to make a change to this. And, you know, I want to, you know, update that directly as opposed to having to wait for the proposer to go back and edit it. But at a high level, the workflow and the requests are throughout the entire Coursedog application, curriculum, catalog, and scheduling in the same way. Cool. So I bet a lot of folks are asking about the scheduling, thinking about the scheduling timeline, and I'd love to just talk a little bit about the mechanics of the management and the maintenance of Coursedog. I don't know if you know, Bonita or Grant, I'd love to, you know, how do you folks think about, especially having so many different terms and complexity going on, how do you sort of use Coursedog to keep schedulers up to date of, you know, your different deadlines and timelines? And then, like, how much maintenance is there involved in, you know, working when the scheduling cycle is on and when it's off and things like that?
Thanks, Justin. So one piece of functionality I wanted to pivot to here are phases, which have been absolutely critical for keeping our schedulers and keeping SOC on track with our schedule builds. And just as a quick summary of what phases are for everybody. They are temporary granular permission modifications within the interface. So for NAU in the scheduling product, defining a phase just says for a specific set of time, certain fields have a certain role or permission or access allotted to them. So we have identified different phases in our timeline as being the start of the builds, the pre-planning phase, the room assignment phase, the request and maintenance and complete term phases. So with this, we're able to keep ourselves and schedulers on track, since these phases also do integrate themselves directly into the UI. If you open up a section editor with a phase on it, as an end user, you can explicitly see exactly what phase you're in. And then this corresponds with the permissions that are allowed in the schedule, both on a granular level and on a higher system level as well. So that's been absolutely critical in ensuring that we stay on track and that nothing, again, slips through or that anybody is doing something that they shouldn't.
This is why NAU is so good. Stated like an, I could not have said it better, Grant. That was impressive. I think for folks who are tuning in, a lot of schools as well will use Coursedog for the room scheduling process that's integrated with section scheduling. And you can use phases to decide, hey, on this date, maybe my priority 1 rooms are available or my rooms become available. Or it could be as simple as, hey, on this date, my section fields are not going to be available. And then I'm going to require people to go through and create, hey, I deliberately am coming and I'm creating an after the fact change request, right? I'm coming in and I'm saying, hey, I need to change this section, et cetera, et cetera. But the phases make it, you can almost imagine it's like a knob that is literally, you just switch it to decide what are the access permissions for our end users. And it abstracts away all the crazy, switch this field and switch that field and switch this room. It's just like a knob so that you can go back and forth on this. And you can keep all your schedulers in the loop because there's a really simple timeline that you can put at the top of your scheduling app. And that makes it so that you can see, hey, here's when we do the rollover. Here's when department stop scheduling. Here's when we do our room assignments and Coursedog Optimizer. And here's when we handle late change requests all in one platform. Last but not least, I think the last thing that I want to cover is, I'd love to just hear, there's a lot of sort of features around calendars and instructor views and filters and preference forms that are baked in to make life easier for our end users, for our folks who are building their section schedules. I'm just curious to hear from the NAU team what sorts of tools, whether it's the calendar or the filters that you folks are using to just understand the schedule as it's being built and that your end users have noted that have been helpful for their workflow. Sorry for drilling you with questions, Grant. I just
yeah. So many of our units are visual, and so the calendar view is important to them, and it allows them to kind of see how they've concentrated classes, and then there are others who prefer the list view. I know Grant prefers the list view when he's looking through things. But the various reports as far as showing how they have spread classes across various meeting patterns, and if they've created a conflict for their instructors, all of those reports are really important for our units to be utilizing. And we're going to be providing some trainings after this schedule build for the new planning process, so that they really have a full understanding of the robust nature of reports that are available in Coursedog. And we want to be sure that they're really familiar with all of those reports and able to access them and understand them. But there are a number of different reports, and all of them there are reports that kind of look at the same thing in different ways. So it depends on how you prefer to view that, and it's really wonderful to have all of those reports available to us and to our schedulers.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'll highlight to folks here, one of the things about Coursedog's reporting dashboard that I think is really helpful is it's configurable. So if, for example, I just wanted to look at the time distribution of the schedule, when contact hours is not 3, I can create an actual filter for that and then even save a view. And this just makes it really easy to sort of drill down on the exact information that you're looking for and be able to access it at the tip of the finger. And again, this is the idea, again, about Coursedog is this sort of reporting is also available in other apps like Curriculum, Catalog. You can do that sort of configurable column level, even, reporting, so that you can see all of your information in one place and have a single source of truth that's integrated with your SIS system for this curricular information. Cool. I think last but not least, and then I think we'll just open it up to questions and stop the demo. For many institutions that use Coursedog, they'll also, use this to do room optimization. Coursedog natively supports room scheduling. We don't require you to go to another application to be able to do so. There's also a lot more baked into this, like exam optimization. We're rolling out for some of our partners right now, native rollovers, and even, things like instructor preference forms to help your faculty to more seamlessly and easily gather preferences in a single place. Is there anything else, Annie, Jesse, Bonita, or Grant, that you folks wanted to cover about some of the ways that Coursedog's added value to NAU before we just sort of open up to Q&A and then debrief? Cool. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I've got one here. So one question that is here is how, this question is, how did you, how did you build out the rules and how long did it take to build all of the rules? I think that's a great question, especially because NAU had 100 rules plus.
Well, given the number of rules and the size of the university, it did take quite some time to build them out, and I built them out almost single-handedly, so it was quite the effort. But I do really want to emphasize that the Coursedog's UI is very intuitive, and I did not need a highly technical background in order to build this out. The rules, the filters, the meeting patterns were all easily constructed without having any kind of computer science or any sort of other scheduling background. As a complete amateur in the interface, I was able to pick it up and run with it within a matter of weeks.
And then another great question here, someone asks how much and how extensive the training was for individual departments to be able to enter the schedule themselves, or the units at NAU.
So we did set up a number of trainings so that we could accommodate everyone's schedule. And so we thoughtfully put together a 3-hour training. And that was not only to cover Coursedog and how to enter data into Coursedog, but so that they would understand what our policies and our requirements are, because that's very helpful for them to understand what's happening behind the scenes or why it's set up the way it is. So we did provide a number of those trainings over a period of several months. We also offer open labs. At the beginning, we offered them, and we'll offer them in our new builds, which will begin in June. And so we have open labs where folks can bring their schedule, and those who maybe, that 3-hour training, there's so many nuances in scheduling as far as our requirements and that type of thing, that it's really difficult for folks to soak all that up. And so those labs are really beneficial to them because they can actually bring their schedule built that they have planned to the labs. They can build. We are there to answer any questions they have, if they're technical regarding Coursedog, or if it's just a lack of understanding about the why behind things. And so, yeah, we did put together a number of trainings, and we continue that each month. We have a training for anyone who's new coming on board, and we provide them the schedule of classes and Coursedog training.
And I think that with any new software implementation, I think there's always training. I think a lot of folks they have this conception of the scheduling process in their head of like, section scheduling happens on spreadsheets, and then like registrar or, approver's job is to like clean it all up and figure out how to get it in the SIS. And then there's like room scheduling. And like, I think, first and foremost, I think that just creates additional work for the ultimate registrar or scheduling coordinator, because if we're not enforcing any way for end users to enter the data, we're necessarily going to be the ones that need to do all of the cleanup afterward. I think it also, it's hard to empower some of these departments to give them the data that they need to build these student-centric schedules, or these schedules that map to your policies when they're on a spreadsheet, right? Because you could tell them, hey, here's the meeting patterns, or hey, here's the same old schedule, or, or hey, here's like this rule, but it can be really difficult for them to remember that and then enforce it on a spreadsheet. And so by sort of my view of this is, if you can have that sort of control to easily operate those rules and easily be able to distribute the schedule, some of the downstream impacts are, improvements for student success, because we can distribute the schedule more effectively. But then also when you get to that room scheduling, when you get to that room optimization, so many fewer bottlenecks if we can actually upfront be able to tell people, no, you can't just have 2 p.m. Everyone have 2 p.m. I think it's quite funny, because a lot of the schools we work with, they're so used to this concept of room scheduling. And I always say, room optimization is dead. It's not I don't believe in it, because bad data in, bad data out, right? And so if we can get good data into the system, and good data once we start to go to our room optimization or scheduling, we're going to get we can get such better results, and so many improvements from an efficiency and student success perspective.
And I also wanted to add to that, those exceptions, those warnings, when they're cleared, we train like, clear your warnings as you see them. They're your guides. They're like, they protect you from, making an error. But also those rule exceptions, they send them in, and we train them, send them in at the time that you have, that you see that you've got a warning. And like you said, that does help us so much, because we're able to review them and to either approve or help them to find a different way to get where they're wanting to go with it. And we can do that far in advance of the end of a build. We can do it during the build, which takes so much pressure off from us and saves so much time. And it really, reducing that frustration for academic units is so worth it, because we're doing it slowly as we go through the build, rather than all at the end when if they were to give you a spreadsheet and all of a sudden you've got all of these rule exceptions that are being requested. You're getting them as they're being produced, and it's allowing time to really think through them and talk through them and find solutions.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Grant and Bonita so much for joining us today. I'm so grateful for the partnership. You folks have truly made our product exponentially better. I would highly recommend anyone who's here to just talk with Grant or Bonita if you have any questions about scheduling. They know more than I do by a 10x, by a million times. But thank you everyone for joining in. We really appreciate it. Thanks, folks. Thanks, Bonita and Grant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.